Come with me on an idle ride as we watch The Last of Us together.
Can't be any worse out there, can it? I can take care of myself.
How many close calls have we had?
Ellie! Stop! Stop!
Fucking touch me!
It's okay. It's me. It's me. It's me. Look. Sweet Jesus.
Doctor?
What are you doing in here? This is our future. Think of all the lives we'll save.
I struggled for a long time with surviving. And no matter what, you keep finding something to fight for.
Welcome to Idle Ride, a podcast dedicated to casual enthusiasm for all things pop culture. As always, I'm Marcy, your host, here with my chosen brother, Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul.
To discuss the 5th episode of The Last of Us TV series titled Endure and Survive. Our live reactions to the show will be available as bonus episodes if you would like to watch along. So, last episode ended with Henry and Sam holding Joel and Ellie at gunpoint. Finally, we get to hang out with Henry and Sam, who were a fairly big part of the game, or at least big in our hearts, right, Paul?
They played an important role getting Joel and Ellie out of some shit, and
yes,
we fell in love with them along the way.
That's true. So we start the episode with the Kansas City resistance fighters. I felt after a while, it's like, I don't really know what to call these guys because they're not good guys. So now I'm just going to call them the Kansas City Gang because I kind of just feel like they're a gang. They show this series, kind of a montage, if you will, of all the brutal things that the Kansas City Gang does to Fedra, because Fedra admittedly also did lots of violence to them, but they're retaliating with just as much terrible violence and rape and killing and lynching and all kinds of horrible things.
Although the rape wasn't explicitly shown on any scene, we're assuming that they're doing these terrible things.
Well, they show a naked woman being dragged around by a couple of guys in the scene.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mostly just saw people being dragged by ropes with sharp things sticking out of their chests. And
yeah, as you know,
You got sense for this.
I got senses. I immediately saw, I was like, oh, that woman's being raped. Like, that was the only thing I saw. There could have been anything else happening, and I was like, oh, I see that. I see you, rape. You can't get away from me.
And I guess it's important that during that horrible scene, it's also Henry and Sam navigating their way to safety.
Right. After you see all of the atrocities, it swings over to Henry and Sam, and Henry is speaking out loud, sort of, I'm assuming for our benefit as an audience, because he probably wouldn't be talking aloud to Sam, but Sam is deaf, and they are signing to each other and talking about how they're going to get through this. I've personally been enjoying that The Last of Us has included a lot of individuals of different abilities. We have people with amputations. We have a person with dementia in a wheelchair. We have Sam, who is deaf. And then we also have Frank, who is in a wheelchair and who had a stroke. So lots of examples of people who aren't just what we would consider a regular neurotypical person.
Yes, the future isn't as ableist as a lot of other shows might portray.
Because it's true, people would have tons of issues because medical science isn't really around to fix them, so you just have to come up with a way to manage whatever fucked up thing happened to you during the apocalypse.
Yeah, we're back in the Middle Ages when it comes to that.
Paul has kind of a fun, quick reaction to Henry and Sam. And I think most people who have played the game remember them and loved them.
I really did wish they would last longer in the game.
Yeah.
Like, the team up with them was a highlight.
It is.
I was thinking about how it'd be really a cool, different take on the story if Sam did survive, and in Last of Us 2, he was there with Ellie and they were like besties.
It would be such a different story if they had lived.
Mm-hmm.
Henry and Sam add another little bit of humanity to the team and just Obviously, Henry and Joel made a connection with being the protectors of the people that they're with, the children that they're with, but also for Joel to have someone else to kind of share that burden, but also young enough that, Joel's in his 50s. It's kind of nice to have a young guy around.
Yeah.
Like, help do some of the literal heavy lifting of hearing when somebody like sneaks up on you. So
Yep.
so that would have been nice to just have in the group. And then, of course, Sam is so adorable, so innocent. Having that person who gives everybody a reason to kind of move forward and to not be as mean and cruel is a good thing.
I also was thinking that maybe a little bit of why Joel took Henry under his wing so quickly was that Henry's got a little bit of the Tommy attitude. He's a little bit overeager to join stuff. He actually says something like that a little later. He's a little hot-headed in the way that Tommy seemed to be.
Maybe reminds him a little bit of his brother. I think also recognizing that Joel calls him a rat, but Joel's never really been a joiner, so what would he have done in that situation? He probably would have done everything that he possibly could. If it was Tess, he would have done everything to get Tess those medications. Exactly what Henry does. I mean, that's later in the episode, but I think he recognizes in Henry a person who's willing to do whatever it takes to take care of the person that they love, and that's kind of Joel's whole attitude.
For sure. And we'll totally get into that when the scene's more relevant.
Henry ends up getting a gun. We learn in the next scene, when the doctor shows up and takes them to the attic, that their guns don't have bullets, and I hadn't really heard that the first time we watched it, but Henry actually says it, that neither of their guns have bullets in them.
Yeah, and admittedly, bullets are hard to come by, but you would sort of expect a show like this might not care too much about consistency there. Like, there's always a chance he could have scrounged up a bullet between the scenes, and it's good that they didn't do that because it wouldn't have made a lot of sense and it would have confused us all. But a lot of shows do that kind of stuff.
They do. I like the idea that you're just so desperate that you use an empty gun to threaten someone, and that makes it more interesting when you watch it in the scene. Maybe if I had remembered, but I'm bad at remembering things. Also, we talk through the show, so sometimes we miss things because we're chattering away at each other. But, it makes it more compelling that they don't have bullets in the gun, and then they really have to trust that Joel's not going to do anything.
Yeah, when the tables turn.
Yeah, exactly. I also love that Sam has one of those magic slate paper boards, which that is definitely a classic type of toy that I remember playing with when I was a kid, like the Etch-a-Sketches and the things where you can just draw and just redraw and redraw and redraw. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of toys are just timeless. Kids are always going to want to play with something like that.
Yeah, and they're super useful because you don't need 500 pieces of paper.
Exactly. And it's a very useful tool, obviously, for Sam, because then he can actually communicate with people other than Henry.
Yep.
And the actor who plays Sam is deaf in real life, so I like that they took the effort to hire a person who is deaf instead of faking it with an actor who doesn't have a disability. Mm-hmm. I never know how to feel about movies like I Am Sam, where a person who is totally normal plays a person with a cognitive disability, and you're just like, ooh, I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah, I also just recently saw The Whale with Brendan Fraser, and I didn't really know much about it going into it, but he wore a fat suit to make himself look 600 pounds. And I had basically this exact conversation with someone, and she's like, yeah, just get someone who's 600 pounds if that's critical to the movie.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, he was overweight. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess there might be a 600-pound actor out there that could bring the gravitas needed to the role, but I don't know.
You're not going to find him if you're just looking for Vin Diesel in a fat suit.
Often directors, too, will have an idea of who they want the specific person to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy what actors do, changing their bodies, everything for these roles when you could just, find somebody who's already fat.
Yeah.
I also noticed that in the scenes where they're signing to each other, there is a lot more silence. Mm-hmm. And I loved that the show tossed in some of the really classic ambient music from Last of Us. when the silences were the signing, and then you could hear in the background all of those really classic Last of Us background music.
The music almost felt, it was so serene that it felt like the two brothers communicating was just the most important thing in the world to everyone. Just sit back, the music's going to just showcase them, and you can just enjoy their interaction.
Yeah, it's just so sweet. It's such a sweet brother-sibling moment where it's obvious that they care about each other. It's obvious that they know each other. You can tell that Henry is really just trying to keep it together for Sam. And Sam's needs that reassurance, and you can imagine what it would feel like to be the person trying to reassure him, but just like knowing that the world is on fire. It's also that you're being hunted.
Yeah, definitely. It's such a classic trope where there's someone who's doing the job of handling the situation, and part of handling the situation is telling other people not to worry, even though they have every reason to worry because it's absolutely not a solved problem. And I think my favorite play off of that was in Team America World Police when she tells him, "Promise me you'll never die and I'll have sex with you," and he's like, "I will never die."
That's good. Yeah, I mean, there's so many moments like that. And I guess the question is it the right move, even if it's a kid, to tell them not to worry? And Andrew's mom is a child psychologist, and she would probably say that, yes, it is. Like, the most important things to children is to feel safe. And so you don't necessarily have to lie to children, but you have to create a safe story about what's happening.
That's a great way to frame it.
I mean, obviously you can't stop all the bad things from happening, but you can try to reassure a kid that you'll do everything in your power to keep them safe.
In the light of what you just said, it sort of changes my mind on how I felt about that scene. Later on, Henry does openly admit to actual problems and saying we do have to go. But in this scene, I was a little bit on the fence about that issue because we got to see the doctor and Henry talking about, hey, we've only got, food for 11 days, no bullets. We think this place is absolutely a safe location because the only person who knew that location got murdered in the riots. So we are at least safe for that. And I think, yeah, you can totally tell Sam, you are safe for the next 10 days.
Yeah. Sam gets his little crayons and he starts drawing in the attic, and he's creating a lot of superhero imagery. Why do you think that he chose superheroes?
As someone who was formerly a 8-year-old boy, I think that sometimes you get obsessed with drawing something. I remember around that time, I had figured out a technique to draw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle faces, and I would start with the bandana, and then I would do the top of their head, and then I'd give them their turtle cheeks, and then a jaw, and I did endless variations on this. I could probably do it again now, even though I haven't thought about it in years. I imagine he was going through something like that, where he had a vivid imagination of, like, this superhero doing all kinds of cool stuff.
That's awesome. I don't remember being obsessed about drawing. I am a terrible drawer. You don't want to see anything that I've done even now. It looks like a 12-year-old on crack did it. I don't know, but I loved writing, and I loved writing my name. I got obsessed at one point with just labeling everything with my name. And so one time I got in super big trouble because I basically was using a permanent marker and like signing my name in cursive on everything. And I signed it on some things that my parents, obviously, like wooden furniture and stuff that my parents didn't want me to do, obviously. And we talked about then there's that skip to 10 days later in the attic.
Before we do that, I know that you're not at all interested in the Kathleen story, but I did want to point out a couple things about the talking with the collaborators, because we missed that somewhere. So Kathleen, as we said before...
I didn't even put it in there. That's funny.
I know you didn't. Kathleen opened up going into this prison cell with a dozen or so informers, and we get the sensation that it was a well-known group of people. Everyone knew who the informers were. And so when the riots happened, they were immediately nabbed for presumably justice. And Kathleen, I just love how petty she can be sometimes, because she was talking to them about how, like, sure, it's nice to have creature comforts from Fedra by selling your neighbors fucking apples. And she looks at someone.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Like, she's totally got none of the context of why Henry, which we'll talk about, did what he did. To her, informers are just pieces of shit who want vodka or whatever.
I don't believe that she didn't know that. I don't believe she didn't know
It's a
from the
framing.
doctor.
It's totally framing.
Yeah, she knew. She just decided that it didn't matter. Even though her own brother literally told her, and we learn that later in another scene, to forgive them. Yeah, they're fucking kids, you bitch. Like...
Yeah, and the end of the interrogation scene, she'd basically promised every one of the informers that they would get a lenient
trial
if they continued to inform. You're informers, inform. And that's how they got the doctor's information, so that's how they killed the doctor, because the story would have gone totally different if the doctor had managed to survive. And of course, then she does the classic villain thing of, make sure to burn the bodies, it's easier that way. So that's a flavor of the Kathleen sociopathy. But there's one thing she said at the end of that I thought was just hilarious, because also it would have changed everything. She's talking about Henry and she says, he's not my 7th priority. Maybe he should be.
And that's so specific. Like, she literally has a list of 7 things that she's working on. Yep. Okay, and he's definitely not the 7th on that list, Perry. I think I still don't understand why Perry follows her. Even the scene later, I know we're jumping around a lot, but when she's standing in her like childhood bedroom and complaining, Perry, he says, well, I'm loyal to you because you're the one that did something. And I'm like, but why? Like, look at her. Like, I just, if I was him, I would have been gone Johnson a long time ago. But again, I guess I'd probably be more of a Henry. Like, I'm going to do what I got to do to survive, people.
I feel like that makes you a better person. I do want to provide a possible perspective on why Perry and everyone was loyal to her for that, is that they've been living for 20 years under a Fedra that is brutally oppressive and cruel, and they wanted any kind of change. They were desperate for change, and this is still the opening weeks of the rebellion. The brother dies, and they finally get Fedra off of them, and so Kathleen will be riding this social high of having brought the change that everyone's been envisioning for decades. And so they're gonna give her some leniency on that she definitely doesn't deserve.
I know, Paul. Stop being so logical. Like, I get it.
You get it.
But
you
at the same time...
she's a complainer.
Well, and realistically, I just don't see... What did she do? I guess I'd like to know what steps she actually took to, like, revolutionize them, because all she does is talk about her brother, so maybe that's how she did it, is basically saying, because everybody seemed to love her brother. That's all everybody can talk about. Your brother was so great. Your brother was this. Your brother was that. So she basically wouldn't have been able to create the revolution. Here, I've got it. I've got the train of thought. I know what happened. If he hadn't died a martyr, they wouldn't be out from underneath the boots of Fedra, because they needed him to die to get the momentum to them take over. Right,
which I think that is key to why that scene in the bedroom where she's complaining actually kind of matters, is she said that she knows her brother didn't want them to take revenge. She knows he's a good person. She knows he's popular. She's not going to do that. That's not her plan.
Yeah, she doesn't care, because the only reason she did the revolution was because she was fucking pissed at Henry and Sam. That's that's literally her only reason. And she wants to find them and she wants to kill them. In that sense, she's a single-minded terminator of a woman.
Yep. I think we've done the full Kathleen analysis. I don't think we need to talk about that scene when we get there. We've basically set her as, they have tried to enhance her story by giving her one. And they did job. It's not the best job.
I mean, at least there is a person there instead of like a caricature of a villain.
Yeah. And as single-minded as she is, I think that there's a couple of things that she does that are interesting. We have a couple scenes showing the time between when Sam and Henry hold up and when they decided they actually had to go. And so we see just a really desperate scene of the brother studying the patterns of the troops as they're wandering around. And Sam is trying to do his best to be patient, but he's hungry. He has a very small idea of what exactly is going on because still at this point, Henry hasn't really revealed anything. They still have hope that the doctor's going to come back and rescue them. And just the bit when Sam knocks on the ground to get Henry's attention is like, I want to eat that last can of food. It just made me think how isolating being that hungry and stressed when you're a kid. Super Sam is doing a good job.
It's true. He also can't hear anything that's happening, so he's completely reliant on Henry. For example, Henry hears gunfire, but Sam doesn't know that there's gunfire happening until Henry can tell him, you know? Mm-hmm. So he, in that sense, is very reliant on his brother to let him know sound-wise what's happening. And in a revolution or any situation where you're trying to hide from something, I mean, the game literally has a mechanic for you to hear through walls. Hearing is super important to survival, and also being quiet. If you can't hear yourself, you don't know if you're being quiet or not. And he's completely reliant on Henry for all the information, too. Mm-hmm. It's not like he can listen into a conversation unless he can lip read. So,
which I think he can do some, because there's a few times when the brother would just say words to him.
He does it a little bit with Ellie, too, like when she's reading the comic to him. I mean, not only is it isolating for Henry, but it's totally isolating for Sam. And he is doing a great job of entertaining himself. I mean, he's drawing because what else is there to do? Yeah. He can't be a lookout, so he's just going to entertain himself during that time.
I don't know. I think he could have been a little more of a lookout.
He could be a visual lookout,
for sure. They have the talk about how they have to leave the hidey hole, and they have a nice hug, which I thought was a good moment.
When they hug is when Henry tells him that actually he doesn't think the doctor's coming back.
Sam probably...
He figured it out.
He suspected
He's not dumb. He's not a dumb kid.
He's seen this shitty world. He's lived in it his whole life. They
leave the attic, and then as they're traveling through... Here's my word again, buildings! Henry hears some gunfire and a bunch of trucks and cars driving really fast and a crash. Guess who showed up? Again, we're doing some flashbacks here. I think we talked about this early in like the first episode and the second episode. We rewind a little bit or do a little bit of a flashback. Like Bill and Frank's episode was, half of it was a flashback. Yeah. So now we're seeing Joel and Ellie from a different perspective.
They hear the crash. Henry looks out to see what's going on, watches Joel shoot one of the guys. Joel glances his way and makes eye contact, and Henry has to duck. And my only thought at that moment was, God damn it, Joel, you ruined all of that planning of the patterns of all the patrols just by doing this right as they left.
It's true. Henry did all that studying and figuring out to know exactly when to leave, and then Joel fucked it up. But you could think about it opposite, that he created a distraction for them to get away.
At this point, Henry gets the idea to follow Joel and Ellie, probably partially because he already understood what they were doing. He says it later that he saw them go in towards the tallest building so they could get a view, so they could figure out a way out. And that's his whole sales pitch is, I've already got a way out. He's starting to formulate a plan, and they follow up the tall building. And as I understand it, Sam hasn't been in a lot of combat over these several years. And in the scene when they're about to step on the glass, Henry pulls out a gun and gives it to Sam and says, like I told you, or like I showed you. So they'd been practicing ambush techniques somewhere along the way.
I'm guessing when Henry created the plan to use Joel basically as his bruiser, he saw that Joel took out 3 guys at least all on his own. His goal is to use Joel for what he's good at, which is taking people out and protecting people. So he's like, how do I convince a guy like that to take me too? It's ambush him. And ambush him first so they don't hurt me. And then gain their trust, which is basically what he ended up doing. But, okay, so I am a little confused why Henry decided to put his gun on Ellie. But I guess it was a smart tactic because if you put Sam, the little kid, on Joel, he's less likely to come at a little kid.
Yes, only if we're all agreed that there's a shared hidden assumption that in this world, when you see two people together, there's like the protection thing going on, and that Joel therefore cares about kids because he's with a kid. Because some psychopath could just pick up the kid and be like, hey, I've got your child.
I'm pretty sure that Henry saw that Ellie didn't have a collar around her neck and wasn't being pulled along.
For
she was
sure.
actively following Joel, so he could tell that the child that Joel was with wasn't there against her will.
All I'm saying is that in this post-apocalypse, in a place where there's been riots and rapes and murders, maybe you shouldn't just assume someone's not going to murder your little brother.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm definitely on the fence about this. You
Which
want
is
the
why you brought
person.
it up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if I had a child with me, I would not let the child point the gun at the big bruiser. But maybe he accurately assessed Ellie as maybe more dangerous because she's got her switchblade. I don't know.
100%. And in video game logic, it could totally have just been you pick the lower probability of the 4 options that you have, because in Fallout logic, that's the best one, right?
Yes.
We have caught up to the moment where Joel and Ellie get ambushed. Ellie wakes up Joel, and there's the bit of a standoff where we have an audio clip of Henry trying to trust Ellie and Joel and get them to trust him.
I don't know what the next step is with something like this, but if I lower my gun, we didn't hurt you, so you don't hurt us. Right?
That's right.
It's a weird fucking tone, man.
That's just the way he sounds. He has an asshole voice. Joe, tell him he's okay.
Everything is great.
Dude.
Fuck. Okay, listen. I'm gonna trust you.
I just love Joel and Ellie together. That's just his asshole voice.
It's so true. He just has a walking asshole voice.
Yeah, and I love how she tries to get him to say it better, and then
he just
still
makes it worse.
sounds. Yeah, he just makes it worse. But Ellie in this episode also has already gotten Joel's number. There's lots of moments where you realize that she knows that she can manipulate him if she just hounds him enough about things, which I think is freaking adorable.
She flat out says that later in the episode.
Yeah, I got that clip. It's gonna happen.
Okay.
Because it's so cute. I mean, everything about them past this episode is just moments that I can't get enough of, that squeeze my little heart meats.
So there's so many favorite moments, but my next favorite moment after the asshole voice thing was Joel asking permission to sit up and being told that he could sit up slowly. And we get this beautiful shot, a long shot of him doing the world's slowest sit up. And this is why we do crunches, people.
The next scene, too, is where they're sitting around the fire and eating food together. And it definitely made me think, because I am an English major a long, long time ago, and I took a class on the classics and wrote a whole paper on hospitality and how important hospitality was in like the ancient world, where even if it was an enemy, if somebody came to your home or came to your fire, you would always offer them food and offer them like a place to sleep, because I'm guessing in the ancient times, you know, those were the things that people needed the most. And if you didn't choose to share, you'd be fucking trying to kill each other all the time. So I feel like this was like a really good example of that type of moment of hospitality where they share food. So sharing food, you can't hold guns, you can't do anything when you're eating other than just eat and talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great way for people to
Find a common ground.
Find a common ground. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Another part of this conversation was great when Henry was saying that the food was good. Where'd you get it? And Ellie's so terse. Like she's trying to channel Joel or something. She says, from Bill, he's dead.
Aww.
And then it seems like towards the end of this meal together, they don't quite figure out a way to see eye to eye because Henry suggests that, or no, Joel suggests that we call it a win and we just move on after this. And to me, that's Joel's really nice way of saying, yeah, you beat me, but like, I'm not going to go after you.
Yeah. Joel immediately realized what was happening the moment he saw who was holding guns on him.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that these guys weren't professionals. They're desperate.
Yeah, an 8-year-old's not going to point a gun at you under ideal situations.
So it didn't take him long to figure out he might as well, these kids at least know the area. We'll stick together for a period of time until we get to that high point, which I think we talked about a little bit with Henry.
Yep.
Knowing that they were going to the highest point, so they end up climbing up to the top of the tower together.
Or at least to that conference room towards the top, which is good enough.
Right.
It's got a great view. And so Henry takes Joel aside and bears some of his laundry, not a lot. And I think he does it very inexpertly, which maybe is the right call because the fact that he's so bumbling about the truth that he's willing to reveal shows that he doesn't know what he's doing.
And maybe just shows that he's actually not good at lying or deceiving, because he doesn't lie to Joel. He actually does think all the information that he has is correct, and he does want to get out of the city.
He does lie because he says pointing an empty gun at someone was the most violent thing I've ever done. And then later on, he talks about how that's not entirely true.
Well,
that's why I'm saying he's doing an inexpert job.
Yes.
But yes, he confesses that he was one of the dirty informants, where we get the line that both Marcy and I keyed on, I don't work with rats.
It's such a dumb line, really. I mean, you don't work with rats. Is that really what people say? It sounds like it's from the 1940s or something.
Yeah, stool pigeon, see?
Yeah, exactly. But I get the sentiment. Because if he could betray one person, why wouldn't he betray Joel and Ellie? So I understand why you might not want to work with someone like that. But at the same time, he's already confessed many times to Ellie that he's been on both sides. So
he has no moral high ground here.
He doesn't. He doesn't in any situation. So that's what makes him kind of a unique character in my mind. Is that he can't really take a moral high ground in any instant. He's just trying to do what's right in the moment.
Yeah, but that it just makes it extra weird that he says, I don't work with rats. Like, maybe you've worked with them before and you forgot.
Or maybe you were the rat.
Right? We know that you work for Fedra sometimes.
And he literally tells that story about lying about being injured so he could take people's stuff. So he was a rat.
At the very least, there's trust issues, and maybe being a Fedra informant is considered to be the worst kind of trust issue in this apocalypse. You don't really have a lot of control of your options, and so you want to keep them open and maybe try and find some common ground with these people that you don't really trust.
Right, and I feel like kids are a little different because Henry's not an adult, really. He looks like he's maybe he's 18. He probably grew up in Fedra. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's too far of a stretch to think that if you've been indoctrinated by Fedra, that you might trust them more than a bunch of rebels.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And also in the background of this scene, we see Ellie and Sam becoming friends, and it's super cute and adorable. They're chatting and laughing. And Henry says it's really good to hear laughter.
Right, he hadn't heard that in a while.
He hadn't heard that in a while, and I don't think Joel's probably heard that kind of laughter in a long time. So even though this is a moment where Joel's kind of a hard ass and says, I don't trust rats, or that, having those two kids in the background laughing and being silly has already got his heart warming to these two.
Yeah, I think that did more than anything Henry said.
Yes, exactly.
And I guess we should take a moment to talk about Henry's plan, why it's bad, and why they go with it. Henry basically cited that he's an expert of the region from living there for so long. He drops down some facts that we don't really have an ability to verify, but he mentioned that, hey, you haven't seen any walkers on the surface. Isn't that kind of weird? Fedra got rid of all of the infected on the surface in the area that we know of. So the thing that they did is they drove the infected underground, which is why underground is suddenly considered super dangerous. Then he reveals another claim that Fedra got rid of the underground infected too, so the whole area is sterile, I guess, according to that argument, but that it's not super common knowledge that it's sterile, which means that the underground is safe from people, and so that's why he thinks that's the best plan.
I mean, they do travel through the tunnels here, but then they end up on the surface later.
I think that's when they got out of the tunnels. Like, the plan worked so well that we kind of didn't even realize that was the whole plan.
Probably. I do like, again, these silent communications that we start seeing between Ellie and Joel.
Mm-hmm.
Ellie has taken Joel's rules to heart. Again, she's following his rules and he doesn't follow his rules. So he told her that she has to do exactly what he tells her to do at all times. And you know that Ellie's got opinions about things, lots of opinions. But in these moments when they're actually making the big decisions, she keeps her mouth shut the whole time.
Does.
And she keeps looking to Joel. She does it in the scene when they're eating at the fire. She lets Joel make the decision about whether or not Henry and Sam go with them. And she lets him make this decision here. She doesn't try to influence him in any way. I mean, she does a little bit, obviously. She stops him from killing Henry and Sam. She influences him that far. But she keeps her mouth shut during the actual decision-making moments, which I think is really telling of her character, that she recognizes that Joel has the experience to tell if they should trust these two. Even though she likes Sam, she doesn't know anything about Henry. It's telling of how close their relationship is already.
Mm-hmm. They're starting to get on the same vibe. Yeah, so then we get a begrudging team-up sneak sequence where they find their way to the tunnels.
Yeah, and again, this is where you get a lot of that classic music from the game. I kind of wish I had gotten, like, maybe just a little bit of it to play here.
Editor!
I do, just whenever I hear it, it brings me back to those moments of playing the game in a good way, in a nostalgic kind of way. But Joel also tells Ellie to get her gun out, so he's trusting her here in this moment to get her gun out and actually have it available to use, which is new.
Can I interrupt for that part? So This was the first time I noticed the body language between the two that you were talking about. And the fact that he said, get out your gun, she pulls it out of her pocket instead of her bag, and he gives her a look, and then she looks back at him, and there's like a whole argument, but they're like, we're in danger, we can't do this, and they keep going.
Yeah, because the previous episode, he had told her to keep it in her bag, not on her person.
So she doesn't shoot her ass off or whatever.
Yeah, so yeah. So there's a lot of like really fun little callbacks like that between the two.
Yeah.
And then they're having a little conversation as they're walking through the tunnels, which Joel is obviously really annoyed about because he doesn't want people to be loud. And Henry says something about, you know, you and your dad, and then both Joel and Ellie are like, he's not my dad, I'm not her dad. And it was like, they're on the same vibe. They're even saying things at the same time.
Yep.
I love it.
And it shows that Henry clocked something about their relationship, and he brings it up later that, yeah, maybe you're not her dad, but you were a dad. So it feeds information to him to bring up later in a really clever, cool way.
Mm-hmm. So then they come across this really unique tunnel that has drawings on the walls and drawings on the door. And then we learn that early on, when the infection was rampant through the city, people were actually living underground, and that they've come across one of the schools underground, which is it's almost jarring in these dark, dank, ugly tunnels to suddenly see this like really bright and colorful murals on the wall and kid things down in the tunnels.
Yeah, and so I was wondering if you thought about this too. When Sam saw this, his face lit up, and I thought to him it'd be like, oh, I'm around my people. I'm home. There's other kids here who also draw on walls. And he started walking forward and everyone stopped him, which was sensible. But just the heartbreak of being pulled out of that joy kind of shattered me a little.
You're right. I kind of felt that way too, that he maybe thought that there's actually people still down here and kids down here and that I could play with someone my own age. But yeah, when the reality sort of hit that, nope, you're not allowed to go in first. Somebody with a gun has to go first. It is heartbreaking that he really will never have that experience of being with other kids. If he had lived through it, maybe, but...
Yep. We're denying that to the audience just like it was denied us.
Once we get into the room, it is like a school room. And, well, Ellie basically tells Joel, why don't we just stay here? Because he wants to move on. And again, here's that connection between Ellie and Joel, where normally he probably would have just moved on and pushed people through this. Because Ellie wants to stay, he ends up acquiescing and staying even though he doesn't really want to. And the kids start reading a comic together that I guess they both have collected. They both have different issues of this comic, but they both read it. So that was a sweet little moment where they share the same comic book. And I don't specifically remember being able to collect these comic books, but I'm guessing that in the game that this was a comic book that you could collect as Ellie and Joel.
Should have looked that up. Sorry. I know that they talked about comics in there. Like, it was definitely a part of it.
My guess is that it probably is straight from the game.
We can confess here that you and I are not big on collectibles in games.
I do collect the bobbleheads in Fallout, but that's just because they give you bonuses.
Yeah, that's not... That's just super useful.
What is your thought about reading text in games?
I
you know how...
am a lore whore.
You are? Interesting.
Yeah, I will, especially in BioShock where it's audio recordings. If you make too much progress, then the audio recording and then the next, enemy you see will have overlapping audio and then you miss the lore. So every time I get anything, I just stop and listen to the whole thing.
I do remember that from BioShock. That was a nice thing about BioShock, is that it was actually like a recording. So you would hear a really good voice actor talking. But some games, oh my gosh, you'll get these books and it'll be like a 12-page book in the game. But that's a lot of text to read in a game.
You are not wrong. And you've completely broken up the whole flow of everything. No, I get you.
All right, let's get back to the scene. Another little one of our rants there. This is another scene that shows you that Joel is actually a really good fucking guy. Because this is twice where he's actually apologized for things. He apologizes to Ellie when he wasn't able to protect her and she had to come out and save him. Mm-hmm. A lot of men don't apologize for things that they do wrong. And not as straightforwardly as he does it. He literally says, I apologize. And then he goes blah, 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 and talks about what he's apologizing about. Let me get back to the point. So he apologizes to Henry for calling him a rat and says, there are circumstances where maybe you had to do something. And that's when Henry talks about why he did what he did. Mm-hmm. And he talks about how not only is this poor little guy had to live his life in the apocalypse, then he gets leukemia. Sam gets leukemia. And so he works with the doctor to get leukemia meds, but the only way he can do it is if he gives up the leader of the resistance.
Because
so he does.
There's not much leukemia meds going around, and only Fedra has it. They have a power monopoly and a your brother's gonna die without us monopoly.
Yeah. Most people have a reason for why they're doing bad things. And so I have another clip here to play that's a Henry clip regarding that.
So, still think they should take it easy on me? Or am I the bad guy? I don't know what you're waiting on, man. The answer's easy. I am the bad guy because I did a bad guy thing. But you get it, though. You might not be her father, but you were someone's.
I really like how he doesn't wait for Joel to answer, that he says, I'm a bad guy, I did a bad guy thing. And it makes me think about all of the superhero drawings that Sam does are of two people, and it's him and Henry.
True.
He makes superheroes out of him and his brother. And so whether or not Henry thinks he's a bad guy. Sam doesn't think he's a bad guy. Sam thinks he's the hero of the story. And I think that's kind of how we have to imagine everybody's lives are. Somebody does something bad, but they're actually a hero to someone else because they're saving them for whatever reason.
Yeah, acts are not simply good or bad, and they have consequences, and maybe your deliberate decision was a great thing for someone and an awful thing for many others.
Mm-hmm.
I did think that when Joel apologized, my note that I wrote was, "That's right, you don't know people's situations, Joel."
It's so true. But again, he took a step back. He thought about it and he apologized for it. That is the thing that we're supposed to be doing.
It is a subtle
as humans.
art, yes. And I am not great at it. I try to be better. I guess we don't have to talk too much about the scene since we've already covered it, but this is where they cut to the scene. Kathleen's back in her old room where I guess she spent a lot of time with her brother, and she was reminiscing and talking to Perry. Basically says she doesn't care about her brother being good or right, doing the right thing. She's going to pursue her blood vendetta to the detriment of her entire group of people.
I guess one other thing I might add to this is that previous episode you talked about tribalism, and I think this was a perfect example of that she didn't really care about anything else other than her revenge for her brother. And Perry was like, that's fine, I'm loyal to you. You did what we needed you to do to get us out from underneath Fedra, so I'm following you wherever you go.
It's us versus them all the way, baby.
Yeah, and I get absolutely no sexual vibes between these two at all. Like,
I got that maybe he was fond of her mother.
Oh, weird. How did you get that?
So in the scene, she's in that room and he walks in and she says, "How did you find me?" And he said, "Your mom said you were here." And she looked at him and she said, "Why are you talking to my mom?" And he says, "Well, we couldn't find you." That's the whole discussion. So there's subtext there.
Weird. Interesting. I did not feel like there was anything there at all. I felt like he was just being very clear. Maybe she's seen something between them. I don't know. But at least between these two, it seems very like just, I'm here to be your backup and I'm your boss kind of relationship.
For sure.
This is where they cut to Joel and Ellie getting out of the tunnels, and Henry's really
bragging.
High and bragging about how, check it out, we're up above and we didn't run into any zombies and
life's great. Let's keep going and talk about
let's keep going.
Joining or splitting off after this. And then Joel rightly points out that they're talking too much, too loudly, and the sniper must have picked up on that because he starts taking pot shots. And my thought was, damn, that sniper sucks, because if his first shot doesn't kill someone, what was he even doing?
Well, before we get too much into the sniper moment, I did want to share the clip
yes.
that I absolutely love. This is one of my favorite moments in the episode.
So we crossed the river and then what? Where are you gonna go?
I don't know yet.
Well, we're going to Wyoming. What? It's a huge state. It can fit 2 more people.
Yeah. Maybe we just call this one a success and say our fond farewells.
No, he'll change his mind. Trust me. This is how it goes. He's like, no, Ellie, never, ever, ever happening. And then I'm like, I'm gonna ask you a million more times. And he's like, whoa!
I love how that clip ended with, whoa!
Yeah, exactly. She knows that she can literally mock him to his face and he won't do anything to, and like, she's using his voice. Oh, it's such a kid thing to do. I love it.
Yes, clearly believing that there's no danger left and having a victory lap on Joel.
And like, she's clocked him. I mean, she knows, she's right, that if she just badgers him enough, he'll probably do what she wants him to do.
As long as there's not a safety reason.
Like you said, the sniper isn't very great with his pot shots.
And Joel says it too, so I feel vindicated.
It might be that Kathleen literally told the sniper not to kill them because she wants to take out Henry and Sam herself.
It's possible, but he could have winged someone.
It's true. I think both you and I have pretty clear memories, or at least better memories, of this scene in the game. I think you were talking specifically about that while we were watching the show.
Yes, I have vivid memories of this sniper making it so that you can't take the logical path. You have to find some alternate back way. And in the game, there's so many people to fight, and I just couldn't sneak around them. So I had to just brutalize dozens of people getting to this sniper.
I think my memories are more of once you finally get to the sniper and kill him, and then you have to take over. And for me, it was like one of those moments where I could not beat it, and I just kept having to reload because I was so bad at shooting people with the sniper rifle. Because as we've determined, I'm dick shot Marcy, so when I actually have to do a sniper rifle, it just does not work.
Yeah, where exactly is the dick on a dump truck with a plow?
Well, they might have balls like those stupid assholes that have balls on their trucks.
You shoot
like
the truck
plastic
nuts from front, like it bounces under the car.
Get those truck nuts! Oh, God. Aren't those the dumbest thing you've ever seen in your life?
I want to put them in the top 10, yes.
I just feel like our country has gone in the shithole when people are putting literal testicles on their trucks to make them seem more manly. It's so dumb.
Yeah, there's better ways to do man things. I don't remember the scene as well as you do of once you get the rifle. Clearly, I must have had a better time with that scene because I just remembered it being fun.
Well, fuck you, Paul!
Douchebag.
There's another moment where Ellie was like, no, don't leave us! Like, you can't leave us here! And he grabs her and he goes, do you trust me? And she just looks at him. Another eye moment where she doesn't actually say yes. They just look at each other, and then he like runs off, and she's left with the bros to help them stay clear.
Which, that's a big trust move on Joel's part too, to leave her with them.
Mm-hmm.
The story could have gone wildly differently. Joel died there. But we know that Henry does look after her in a moment when things go crazy. And then we get to Joel finds the sniper, gives him a way out by saying, you don't have to die if you just give me your gun and stay there for a while. The guy, obviously super loyal to Kathleen, kills himself, suicide by Joel, and then...
Yeah, Joel gives him the opportunity to just put his gun down, and he doesn't, so...
And if someone's got the drop on you, like I've done paintball, and you don't want someone to jump in front of you and say, I've got a shot, and then make them pull that shot.
You're absolutely right that it was death by suicide by Joel, because he literally is pointing his gun the exact opposite way and just starts like slowly turning it towards Joel's like, there's no way you're gonna make it there in time. So, but
then Joel picks up the gun and gets the first view of the Kathleen army coming.
And he heard via a
the radio
walkie-talkie that Kathleen was talking to the snipers, like, just keep them held down for a little bit longer. We'll be there soon. And so he knows they're coming. And then they kind of cut to Ellie and Henry and Sam. And you can barely hear Joel in the background going, run! Run! Trying to like scream at them to make them run, but they can't really hear him.
And they've got their own problems.
Yes. Kathleen's got walkie-talkies to everybody in the vehicles, and she's got this big sort of dump truck at the front. And they're like, there's cars in the way. They're such dumb idiots. And she's like, that's why you're in the front. Just knock them out of the way. It's like, obviously, didn't you know what your fucking job was when we started this? Like...
Clearly, we know why she became the leader of this operation.
Yeah, they're idiots.
And to go along with that, when they do all park and get out and then army march forward, they're so lumped up together. 2 grenades would have wiped them all out.
Well, they're obviously civilians. That's like
the
interesting thing. When you watch that scene, you can tell they're not professionals. They're just a bunch of idiots with guns who are following Kathleen because she's on this crazy mission to murder Henry and Sam. There's a good moment. I think Joel manages to get a shot in that crashes the dump truck, but Ellie's still like sort of out in the middle of the street, and Henry runs up and he grabs her, and that's kind of a sweet moment that Henry actually left Sam to go save Ellie.
Yep. Now the teams are working actually as one team which is pretty cool.
And this is where Kathleen sort of gets out of her truck and she's looking for Henry and Sam, and she's super fucking cocky. She's like just walking straight out in the middle of the open. I'm not sure why Joel didn't just kill her in that moment.
That is a great question.
Because Andrew and I talk about this all the time. We're so fucking pissed off because you're just like, the villain is doing a monologue and you're like, just kill the leader. Just kill the leader of the group. And I'm pretty sure you're not going to have as much problem with everybody else because they're just going to be freaking out because you killed the person that runs the show. And that would have been a perfect moment for Joel to just take out the leader of the group.
And then it would have just been this group of idiocracy people running around.
But maybe he didn't know who was who. I don't know. It's
pretty clear when the one person's out there and she's pulls out her gun casually. Like that's leader behavior.
And waxing poetical. Why does Henry answer her? I can't remember. Because she's sort of looking for them, and then like he says something to her and she knows then where they are.
He basically felt like there was enough people there that he was doomed anyway. They were going to surround him, so may as well give yourself up to save your brother.
Right, and that's another cute moment where Ellie tries to convince him not to do it, but he decides to give himself up, and there's a really just brutal line that Kathleen gives. It's, well, kids die, Henry. They die all the time. When he says, Sam's here, he's a kid. She's like, kids die all the time. Oh, really? Wow, that's just rough.
Yeah, I kind of wish I was there to yell back at her, because I would be like, your brother dies all the time too, bitch. I'm not a petty person, but I hated that line.
It does feel kind of like a little kid said it, almost, you know? And I do feel like this actress has that sort of baby face look. That's why it makes it so creepy when she's evil, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, Ellie is given the task of protecting Sam when Henry decides to give himself up, but then...
No, and I feel like Kathleen summons this situation because she pulls out her pistol, she aims it at Henry, and she says, it ends the way it ends.
No, it's true. Like, the summoner of fungal zombies, Kathleen, because the moment she goes for them, the scene where we saw the ground moving in the previous episode comes to fruition here, and a ton of zombies just start rising up out of the ground where the truck exploded. So they must have heard the sound of the truck exploding, and that's why they were coming towards the area. But this is such a good scene, and we had such a good in-person reaction to watching it, so I want to play that first before we continue.
Yes.
Here it is!
There it is.
Here it is! Oh my god!
It's important.
Bariatric zombie. It's a bloater. It's gonna blow its force. Yeah!
Oh, look how strong it is.
Yes!
You should never accept a fight in bad circumstances. You should retreat and fight in better circumstances. And these guys all just stood there.
Yeah, they're dumb. I mean, sometimes there's... Why are you saving her? She does not care about you.
You ran out of ammo.
Oh, henchman goes down.
Head ripped off.
That was such an incredible scene when all the zombies come out and the bloater arrives. I mean, that was so good. It kind of felt like it was a big bad moment. I've been waiting for the big bad, and it finally arrived, and it was so much fun.
It's so cathartic.
And man, that scene where the bloater just fucking rips his head off, that was so badass.
And by his, we mean Perry, the loyal henchman to Kathleen.
Yes, not one of any of our characters. But I was happy that he got taken out pretty quickly. And there's a ton of just great scenes with the zombies in this. So, first of all, Joel is taking out zombies left and right. Ellie's like somehow doing her psychic connection with Joel, looking up at the sniper nest. They, quote unquote, make eye contact. It sure looks like they're talking to each other silently, where she recognizes, she can tell that he's taking out zombies around her, basically. So she's trying to find a safe place. And he notices that she notices the opening in a vehicle, And so he's taking out zombies while she runs up to the vehicle and jumps through it. And then there's this super creepy kid gymnast zombie. And I guess the actress that played this little kid zombie is like a little contortionist or something. So she's like a gymnast. And that's a really good part of the scene. I mean, you can jump in here anytime you want, Paul. But Ellie's like trying to hide in this car, but instantly a little kid zombie jumps in after her. So then she has to jump back out again. And locks the gymnast in. She noticed...
Yeah, I'll jump in now. So
okay.
I don't remember there being a single child infected in the games. And that's fine by me because infected babies are creepy. And I wanted to tie in with Dead Space because Dead Space did bring in sort of fetus infecteds that could, had tentacles coming out of them that would shoot at you. And I don't want to say Dead Space was the pioneer of, zombie babies. It did do a really good job of introducing them and being creepy as fuck. And I guess it just kind of feels natural that Last of Us, the show, would sort of expand the lore to include this.
Sometimes in video games, they had to have a model, right? And they could only make so many zombies before it's too much to have multiple different copies of different types of zombies.
For sure. But it also was a good place to introduce it because we just showed a school with nobody in it. So of course there should be children around here.
Yeah, of course. That's a good point. They're creepier because it just seems like they're faster and just more nimble than a adult human. So anyway, she gets out of the vehicle and notices Sam and Henry hiding under the car and getting attacked. So she goes over to maybe help rescue them. So she pulls out her trusty switchblade like she doesn't have her gun out. She's like stabbing that motherfucking zombie right in the head. She doesn't end up killing it, granted, but Joel does take the kill shot from way up above. But she distracts it enough that she keeps them away from Henry and Sam long enough for her to get them out of there, and they run away in that moment.
I just want to say that when Ellie ran to save Sam and Henry, that's when I got very sad.
No.
Because that's when, if something bad is going to happen, that's where it happened.
Yeah, because Sam's kicking at a zombie.
Yeah.
And later we learn where he got bit. So it is a sad scene for you as someone who knows what actually happens later.
Yeah.
So as the kids are running away, Kathleen sort of corners them and starts giving like another fucking long speech. It's like, shut up, Kathleen.
Yeah.
About fate and that kids die. And then, as fate would have it, she gets killed by the kid clicker. And I was like,
Contortionist kid clicker.
I'm like, that's right, Kathleen. You deserve that. Because you were talking about motherfucking kids dying all the time. And guess what? You got killed by a kid. Eat fate, bitch.
Kids kill all the time in the apocalypse. Yeah, it was pretty satisfying.
Yeah, it was a satisfying death for her, I think, that she got killed by the kid clicker. I enjoyed it.
Same. And I was sort of paranoid that it was going to be one of those, you don't see the death on screen, so maybe she'll come back next episode sort of situations. So I was watching the kid clicker, and she hit Kathleen a few times before going down to bite her face. And you see the bite, so that should have clinched her fate. We'll see.
I think she's dead and gone.
Importantly, they escape the fight and are safe. And they find a motel, I guess, to hole up in. And Joel and Henry they've come to terms with each other. They're okay with each other. And Joel asks Henry to join them on the way to Wyoming, which we heard the clip where that was not on the table. So it has become an option now, which is nice and heartwarming. And then Ellie's reading the comic books to Sam, and Sam gets told it's time for bed so that they can head out in the morning. And Sam doesn't go immediately to sleep. As soon as Henry's not in the room anymore, he asks Ellie about fear.
Yeah, I think this is such a poignant and sweet moment that turns sort of horrific. But in this moment, you can tell that Sam has already started to hero worship Ellie a little bit. I mean, he talks about, does she ever feel scared? And she says, do I look scared? And they're talking with the little magic slate. And he says never. So she's definitely pulling off that casual humor to deflect her fear. Like, I think that's how she deflects it, is with humor.
Which, right, she admits to being afraid of scorpions, I think she said.
Scorpions, and she wants him to laugh, but he's very serious in this moment and doesn't really take her up on any of her jokey moments. So she seriously tells him that she's scared of ending up alone, which is also really sad because she kind of is. I mean, she has Joel now, but before Joel, she was all by herself.
Yeah, and you can sort of expect to die alone in this kind of world. She went from joking around to being deadly serious, and I think it was abrupt for me, but I think it was the right call for her and Sam. And so yes, he reveals that he's been bit on the ankle, and she decides, which is not a part of the game and I think is a huge improvement over the game, that she's going to try a medical intervention on him. So she cuts her hand.
I grew up in a world where, first of all, you don't know a lot about the science of things, but you know that your blood is immune and that you can't get sick. I think it makes complete sense to go, okay, well, I'll rub my blood into your blood and see if that helps. Like, maybe it would. I don't know. Like, she didn't know at the time. The only thing that I always get pissed off on in movies, and this happens way more than you would think in movies and books, where people like make a blood pact or they cut themselves. They always cut themselves on the palm of their hand. Always.
Yes,
always.
Yes.
And I'm like, don't fucking cut yourself on the palm of your hand. Like, how are you going to hold things then? How are you going to wipe your ass? Like, how are you going to do all the things that you need to do if you cut yourself in the palm of your hand? That's the worst place. Just do, like, even if you did it in the meat of your forearm, you can rub your forearm on something. Like, why does it have to be your hand?
Yep.
I'm sure it's not going to come into play later. Like, she's going to be able to hold her gun just fine.
No, yeah, the movies never care about those kinds of consequences. I do like that you provided an alternative suggestion to people.
Yes. Like, if you're going to rub your blood into somebody else's blood, cut the meat of your forearm or, like, your ass cheek. Think about all the meat and stuff that's back there. It's not gonna hurt you to have. Well, I guess you have to sit on your ass, so like your thigh or something.
Yeah, it's a tough question, but the hand is definitely the bad answer.
When Sam is confessing to Ellie, another one of his questions was, do the zombies' minds still exist while they're a zombie? And that's what clues her in to that maybe he's been bit. It's interesting that he asked that question because I think we've discussed that with the cordyceps virus, it probably is likely that people's minds are still there. Their bodies are just refusing their commands.
Yeah.
And I did look up the infection chart. And when you've been bitten on the leg, you have 12 to 24 hours to live.
So,
or not turn into a zombie.
12 to 24 hours remaining, I guess.
Yes.
And so Sam asks Ellie to do a final promise, and that's to stay awake with him that night. And she tries. She gives it her best, but she does not. In the next scene, it is sunrise, and she wakes up sitting in a chair next to his bed, and Sam is sitting looking away from her. I don't really know how that trend. I guess he would have sort of died in the night and then gotten back up, right? Because there's a chance he could have sat up facing her and just attacked in the night, but that didn't happen. So,
well, if she didn't move very much at night, he was probably maybe a zombie for quite a while, but it seems like they're activated by sound. So if she was sleeping and not making any sounds,
no snoring,
then it wouldn't attack her.
Yeah, that's a good point. But yes, Sam is infected. Ellie hopes that maybe he had woken up and was cured and does not take any proper precautions and ends up getting slammed through the door into the room where Henry and Joel were sleeping up until that moment, which means that Henry gets the most horrible wake-up call imaginable when he picks up the gun and has to keep Joel away and decide what to do in this intense situation with an infected attacking someone that he's starting to care about, but also the infected is his brother.
And then, unfortunately, he gets kind of surprised again. There's a moment where Ellie screams out, and he ends up pointing the gun at Sam and shooting Sam and starts freaking out. And Joel again, I mean, I'll give it to him. He was doing his best to calm Henry. I don't think he was afraid for his own life. I think he knew what Henry might do in that moment.
Yeah.
And he was trying to calm him down to get the gun, not to protect himself. I think he knew that Henry was that close to killing himself, and then he did. He shoots himself. We had some very somber talk when it actually happened, so I do want to play that reaction, even though it's kind of sad.
Oh, I forgot.
Yeah. Tragic.
Oh, so sad.
Like, it'd be so hard. Like, if my sister was the one who was bit, like, I don't think I could put her down. Not in the spur of the moment like that.
Well, I think he was just reacting, basically, and then he realized what he did.
It's the hardest thing to do.
Oh.
There was an interaction in the game where I think they were in the school and Sam wanted, I think, like a little toy robot, and his brother wouldn't let him keep it because it was just extra baggage taking up space, and Ellie snuck it into his bag. So, more backpack hero stories.
I feel like you're trying to like deflect this terrible moment by telling like a sweet story about Sam. I think suicide is definitely a theme that's come up multiple times in the Last of Us series. And it is crazy to imagine, like you said, if it was your sister, or say if I had to kill Andrew or something, like those moments you don't know what you would do in them in real life if they actually happened.
Yeah.
The actor who plays Henry, what an amazing actor. Like that whole scene was legit. I believed every moment of it, and it is heartbreaking, and there's really no better way to put it or to discuss it, that it's just a really heartbreaking scene. And it reminds us that, are our main characters ever going to be in a place where they feel safe? Like they can actually let go and love someone and not have to feel like they have to be on guard all the time.
Yep, and that's a question we're not going to answer today. Pretty much what could they possibly do after this thematically except for bury the fallen? Because they really were a team by that point, and they had to show proper respect for their dead. And maybe there's a little bit of they didn't get a chance to do that for Tess, so the fact that they have the time to bury a body is cathartic as well for them.
I guess I'd really not considered it, but Tess's death was a form of suicide.
Yeah, going the way she chooses, but yeah, going.
Interesting that all of the characters that were good characters choose their death moments.
Interesting.
Like Bill and Frank, Tess, except for Sam didn't really get a choice, but Henry, interesting.
Yeah, we'll have to think on that.
And just to lighten it up a little bit, as I was watching Joel dig the graves or standing there next to the graves, like, Pedro Pascal has really nice forearms. And Andrew does always say that digging is the best form of exercise. So people, if you want really nice forearms, just start digging some graves, okay?
Just be careful about your back.
And this moment, I kind of started to think again about my colors, watching the colors in the film. And I had to go back because it's like, oh, I wonder what colors Henry and Sam wear. And all the good people have the color pink or red on them. Henry has a red jacket, and Sam has this kind of pinkish hoodie that he's wearing. And then, of course, when they leave the attic, Henry paints a hero red band across Sam's eyes. So, again, I feel like all of the good characters, or all of the characters that have empathy, tend to be wearing the color red or pink.
Yeah, very much so. I didn't track how often Ellie wore the green jacket over her pink hoodie, but it definitely felt like in that moment, her wearing the green over it was like a subdued. She had changed in a way, and the regret and the apologies, like she wasn't feeling her full self at that moment.
Yeah, I feel like they bring out more color when they're trying to have more happy moments. And then, of course, in the moments that are somber or sad, sort of like her morning jacket.
Her emotional camouflage. Also, closing on that, the last thing she says before the episode's over is asking which way is west. It's like, girl, you need some direction sense. There's the sun. I know it's a little cloudy, but there's roads that go north, south, and east, west. Like, there's a lot of clues.
You were literally using a map before and you didn't know where west was? Like, come on. Oh, man. Yeah, Joel's got some training to do, that's for sure. And the next scene is basically them just walking off into the distance in another classic Joel and Ellie scene. I feel like in the game, you're always looking at them from behind. So whenever I see a scene where they're sort of looking out into the distance and you're watching them from behind is a very game-like shot.
Beautiful. Perfect ending.
I didn't watch the preview for the next episode, so I have no clues as to where they're going to end up, but I remember some of the game stuff, so it'll be interesting to see what the next episode holds. Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we finish up, Paul?
Just that I had the opportunity to watch these episodes this past couple days, and I have deliberately kept myself from watching or seeing any previews about them.
Yeah, because I've been holding off to watch it with you, because that's part of the premise of this fucking show.
I know,
Paul.
I'm just saying, like, I have no idea what's coming next either, and I do want to see it because this episode ended so sadly.
Basically, my soul left my body when Henry shot himself. Thank you for joining us. You can email us at idleridepodcast@gmail.com or check us out at Idle Ride Podcast on Twitter and at Idle Ride Podcast on Instagram. Thank you very much. See you later.
See ya.